All right, so for this tutorial, we are going to be working on pockets, attaching those pockets, and then sewing on a button. So for this pocket, you are going to leave the tail that you have after your slip knot for your chain. We will weave in where we fasten off, but we are going to not crochet over or weave in the original tail that we start with to get this pocket started. And you will need 2 of these. You're going to get started with a chain 28. So I'm going to do that, and then we will get started on row 1. All right, row 1. So I've got my chain 28 here, and we are going to be working in the bottom bumps. Y'all already know how I like to do that. We're going to count in 1, 2, and then 3. So we're going to place a double crochet in that 3rd bump and then all the way down, okay? And so you will wind up having a total of 26 double crochets and then your starting chain for 27 double crochets. So go ahead and place your double crochets in those bottom bumps, and I'll see you for row 2. All right, moving into row 2, we are going to get started with 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to chain 1, we're going to skip a stitch, and we're going to place a cluster in the next stitch. And we're going to do that a total of 10 times, which is going to leave you with 4 stitches, and that beginning chain counts as one of your stitches. All right, so I've got 10 chains and 10 clusters here. We're going to wrap it up with a chain 1. We're going to skip a stitch, and we're going to place 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and we're going to place the 3rd one by picking up both of these loops on that chain, okay? As if we've chained into the bottom bump already. It's always a little bit tight. There we go. All right, go ahead and turn your work. All right, moving into row 3, we're going to place 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to place a cluster in the chain space, followed by a chain, for a total of 10 times. So go ahead and do that 9 more times. All right, I've got my 10 clusters and my 10 chains. We're going to place a cluster in this last chain space, if you already have it. And then we're going to place 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. Now, you are going to repeat rows 2 and 3 all the way up to row 13. And all of your clusters are going to go in chain spaces. All right, so I have worked up to row 13, and then 14 was double crochets across. I have 27 there, and then we should have for row 15, 27 half double crochets. So now we're going to turn our work to work along this edge here, okay? All right, so to get started with the edge, we're going to chain 2 to create a corner. And then we are going to be placing 2 single crochets over every double crochet in those 14 rows that have double crochets at the end of them. So we're going to place our first one where that last half double crochet went, and then we'll place that second single crochet over that double crochet. So go ahead and place 2 single crochets over every double crochet to your corner, and at the end of this edge you're going to have 28 single crochets. All right, so I've got 28 single crochets down this edge, and we're going to be working along the base of our beginning chain. So we're going to chain 2, and now starting with, and it may be a little bit difficult, But starting with that first double crochet, we're going to be, and you're going to see that slip knot from the beginning chain. You're going to actually pick up both sides of the yarn. Goodness me, it's not cooperating. I do apologize. Okay, so that's where our first one's going to go. And then you're just going to place a single crochet at the base of all of that first row of double crochets. So you're going to have 27 single crochets when you get to the other corner, and then you will repeat this edge, and I'll help you fasten off on the other end of that. All right, so I've got my 27 single crochets down the bottom, another chain 2 at the corner. I've got 28 single crochets on my second edge here, and now I'm going to chain 2 to create my fourth corner. I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that first corner, picking up both loops, and then I'm going to give myself maybe 8 inches of a tail. Okay, and then I'm going to weave it back and forth, and then I'm going to come up here back and forth, and then I'll fasten off. Okay, so now we're going to move on to attaching this to the vest or the body. Alrighty, so we are going to be attaching the pocket to the right side of our cardigan. So my buttonholes are over here, and I do have my 4 rows marked with the 5th and 19th stitches, clusters, in those rows marked, because these are going to serve as guides as we're slip stitching our edges to the body of the cardigan. They're going to be our guides so that we stay in a straight line. We are going to be beginning the right pocket in this here right corner where my green stitch marker is, and if you all remembered, I did say do not crochet over your tail. Okay, and the reason is that we are going to be pulling this tail to the inside of our cardigan. So let me go ahead and get zoomed in here and pull down a little bit. So I'm actually going to be using my crochet hook. You can use a darning needle, but we are going to be pulling this tail through the top loops of this cluster where this stitch marker is. So the way I do that is I go back here, I stick my hook through both of those loops, and then I just grab it with my hook and pull back. Now, what you're going to do is actually do a magic knot with your tail and then your new yarn. So go ahead and do that. Okay, so I've got my magic knot back here, and my tail is on the inside of my cardigan. I am going to place my hook in that chain 2 corner space, or that chain space for the corner, and through both loops of that cluster. Okay, and I'm going to flip that piece forward so that I can see my yarn. And now we are going to yarn over or yarn under, and you're going to pull that tail through to the front, all the way through that cluster as well as that chain 2. Okay, so now you're going to go back into the next stitch, and you are going to be working along row 45 here. So you're going to go into the next stitch on the bottom of the pocket. You're going to go into the chain space, and you're going to yarn over and pull through to the front. And don't get frustrated with yourself because I drop this all the time. It's got to be nice and tight. So then we're going to go into the next stitch. We're going to go into the top of the cluster on our cardigan, and we're going to yarn over and pull through to the front. Okay, and you will have 29 slip stitches when you get to your other stitch marker over here. Okay, so you're just working along this line, and you're slip stitching into the pocket stitch and into a chain space, and then you'll slip stitch into the stitch and into the top of the cluster on the body. So I'll see you at the next corner. All right, so I've got all 29 of my slip stitches across row 45 here. So now we're going to turn and work on our edge. So my last slip stitch did go in to the chain 2 space and into the same cluster that this red stitch marker is in. And now I have these stitch markers to keep me in line, because what we're going to do next, working along this edge, let me pick up my yarn, is we are going to go into the first single crochet here, okay, and we're going to go into the middle of that cluster. You see that little hole there? We're going to go into that, and we're going to slip stitch, okay. Now the next 2 single crochets will be in where this chain space is, okay. Ooh. Yep. So we're going to do 2 into that chain space. I'm doing this kind of loose because of the way the camera is, so 1 and 2. Okay, so the next 2 are going to go into this next cluster here, okay. We're going to put it, the first one, we're going to go into this next one, and we're going to go into both loops of this next cluster here. I'm going to slip stitch through, okay, and we'll go into the next stitch, and we'll go into the middle of that cluster, okay. You're going to repeat that all the way up to your next corner. These stitch markers are just here to keep you in line, because now you'll do your next 2 slip stitches will be in this chain 2 space. You can remove your stitch marker, and then you'll do your cluster. So I'll see you in a little bit. All right, so you can see there, my last stitch marker was in this cluster that I was working with. And so now what we're going to do is go ahead and pull that loop a little bit and come here to the back. Where'd my scissors go? And we're going to cut it. Okay. And now we're going to take our darning needles and we are going to leave this through this cluster. It's going to be the next one that you would have slip stitched into. We're going to go through those 2 loops, and we're going to pull it back through that chain 2, okay, like that. All right, so now, and somebody's going to lose their mind because I'm going to tell you to do another magic knot with this tail and your remaining yarn, okay? All right, so we are going to be working along the top of our pocket here, okay? And what you're going to do is actually take your hook and put it in those 2 loops there, okay? Where we originally darning needled there. And we're going to yarn over and do a slip, maybe do a slip stitch through there. And it's going to give us a real nice tight look. So now we're going to slip stitch across the top here, because this is going to give us a real nice connection. So just go ahead and slip stitch. I think it's 27 times for the small, and I will see you on the other corner. Okay, so I've got my 27 slip stitches across the top of my pocket, and I've come to my chain 2. So now we are going to be actually going up to the cluster, sorry, I couldn't find that word, the cluster that's just above the cluster that we marked with a stitch, okay? And what we're going to do is we are going to go through our chain 2, and we are going to be slip stitching into that cluster, okay? So pick up both loops, and then you're going to slip stitch through all of that, okay? Ooh. And now fasten off. Give yourself quite a bit of tail for this one, maybe like 10 inches. And you are going to pull it to the front, and then you're going to take your darning needle and you're going to do your 2 loops here. You're going to go through this twice, same space that we slip stitched into, and the chain 2. We're going to go through here twice, 1 and 2. And then go ahead and pull that tail to the back and do a magic knot. Okay, so now we're on this other pocket, other side of the pocket, and this is harder to really visually show you this, but we are going to start in the chain 2. We're going to go through both of those loops in that cluster, and again, it's really hard to show you on screen. I'm going to try and get it over here. Let's see. Go through both loops. I know you'll be able to get it, and then you will yarn over and pull through to the front of the chain 2. I'm going to do that and I'll come back. Okay, I'm back in the front, and now what you will do is, just like on the other side of our pocket, we are going to go into the next stitch, and because it's a chain space, we're gonna slip stitch into that chain space, insert our hook, and then we'll yarn over and pull to the front, and we'll do those 2 stitches. And then you will go into the middle of your cluster first and the top 2 loops of your cluster second. So go ahead and do that all the way down to the next corner, and I'll help you fasten off. Alrighty, so I have my other edge done here, and so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and give yourself like 6 inches of tail, 7 to 8 inches of tail, and we're gonna fasten off and pull that towards the front. And then I take my darning needle, this is always the slow part, and go through that chain 2, through those 2 loops of that cluster, and do like two nice tight little rounds here. Ooh, too much of a tail. So 1 and then 2. And then what I will do is weave this tail through these loops here 3 or 4 times, just so that it's got like a nice zigzag and a real nice pull. So let's go ahead and I'll talk about attaching the left pocket. Alrighty, so for the left pocket, you will be attaching here in the first stitch instead of the second, okay? And then you will just repeat the steps that we did on the right pocket, and you will have the sewing of buttons to do next. So I'm going to show you how I sew these on, old school style that my grandma showed me, and she was born in 1926. So this button style that we're going to go over will hold up for a really long time. All right, so I'm going to show you how I attach buttons or sew buttons to the cardigans. And I am going to use a technique that I was taught as a small child by my grandma. This is an old school way of doing buttons, so if you've never sewn a button, I am going to show you the way that people have been doing this for centuries, as she taught me. And so what we're going to do, and I've already prepped my needle, you're going to cut about 24 inches of string, okay? And then you're going to make sure that your needle, because this is a beginner or a rookie mistake for a lot of people, make sure your needle can pull all the way through that buttonhole, okay? Then you're gonna double it over, and so you will have 2 strings that we're gonna be working with, okay? You can see that there. And I always knot it twice, okay? So now what we're gonna do, once you have that done, we're gonna go behind the post and out the other side, okay? Go ahead and pull that string just a touch. And now you can remove that stitch marker, because we don't need it anymore. And then what I do is I take my needle and I get it pretty close to the end. And then I go through the loop at the end, okay? And that's gonna make it so that our string is around that post. Then we're gonna take our 20 millimeter button. We're gonna go through one of the holes, okay? Now, we're going to go through the second hole with our needle, and we're going to make sure that we're going into we're going to go into the base of this stitch, okay? So let me zoom in just a touch. So we're going to go into the base of that stitch, which is really the top because we worked from the top to the bottom, okay? And then we're going to pull our string. Make sure it's pretty nice and tight. And then we're going to find the top of that same post, and we're going to go through the top of it. And you should line up perfectly with the other hole of the button. Okay, we're going to do that a total of 5 times. So I'm going to get my 5th time. This is our second. I'm going to do it 3 more times. All right, so I've got 5 loop-de-loops around the button, and my hook, my yarn, or my, I'm still in fiber arts mode. My needle is in the back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to go underneath that post in all 5 of those stitches that we just did. And that's going to bring us to the front. So we're going to flip it to the front, and now our needle is going to come to the front, okay? And now what you're going to do, and you're going to do this pretty tightly, and I hold it with my non-dominant hand or my non-sewing hand. We're going to wrap it around 5 times to make it real tight. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Now we're going to take our needle, go through that top button hole, and then you're going to go through the bottom one. We're going to do that one more time. Now, I don't have to look because I've been sewing for like 35 years. I think I had a sewing needle in my hand when I was like 2 or 3. So now we've got 2 more, okay? So you should have 5 wraparounds, and you should have 7 total here, okay? So now we're on the back. We're gonna go through some of our black yarn, or our black string here, sewing thread here, and we're gonna then pick up that loop. Mine's kind of twisted. Okay, and we're going to pull through. We're going to do that 2 more times for a total of 3. You want to do it in 3 different places, is what I was taught. Okay, that's 2 and 3. Okay. And now I'm going to take my scissors, cut pretty closely there, leave a little bit of string, and now the button is sewn on. So you do that for all your buttons, and then you'll be done.